The real danger in bread is not the gluten. I want you to take a piece of bread, put it in your mouth, start chewing it, don't swallow it, and keep chewing for about 30 seconds. What you're going to notice is all of a sudden it's going to start tasting sweet. And it's not a coincidence. Your body is releasing an enzyme that's breaking down the starch into sugar. And this is the part of bread that almost no one talks about. Bread is mostly starch. Now, what is starch? Starch is a string of glucose molecules on a chain, so it's really a different type of sugar, and all you have to do is break down this chain and it's going to turn into sugar very fast, even though on the label it'll say row G of sugar, so it's hidden sugar. And also, wheat is in almost everything people eat. It's in the morning toast, it's in the lunch wraps, it's in the pasta dinner, it's in the crackers people snack on, it's in the cereals that the kids are eating, it's on that pizza that you had on Friday. The so-called healthy granola bars have wheat in them. An average American consumes wheat nearly every single day. One of the biggest problems the bread blood sugar spike with bread is the blood sugar spike. If we take a look on the glycemic index for bread, it's 75. And the question is, what is the glycemic index of sugar? 75, it's virtually the same. And the glycemic index is how fast that carbohydrate spikes the blood sugar. And on some charts, bread is actually even higher than sugar. So in other words, depending on what chart you're using, when you eat bread, it can actually create more of a blood sugar spike than actual sugar. Yet everyone else is focused on this gluten thing right here. That's the biggest focus. And so then the gluten myth that brings up gluten-free products, right? I see this all the time, like that's going to be a lot healthier. Well, what are they replacing the wheat with? Potato starch, which is just as bad as wheat starch, rice flour, tapioca starch, corn starch. All of these are industrial starches, these right here, okay? It's going to create the same effect, but without the gluten. Let me just talk about gluten for a minute, because gluten is the protein in wheat, and humans have a hard time digesting it. A very small percentage of the population has a problem with gluten, but for some people it can be very devastating, but it's a small percentage. It's not the majority. I would say 90% of the population is not going to have as much of a problem with gluten as they are with the starch in the wheat products. And so it's not just bread, it's the pasta, the cereal, the cracker, the biscuits, the waffle, the pancake, etc. These are metabolic explosions for blood sugar, but not just bread dangers that it affects the LDL. Now there's two types of LDL cholesterol. You have the type of LDL cholesterol that has larger particles that don't create problems for most people. And then you also have the small, dense particle size LDL that can invade the arteries. When you consume bread, pasta, cereal, crackers, and other types of starches, you're going to generate more of the smaller, dense LDL particles, which is going to create problems for the inside of your arteries. And because people consume so much of this stuff, you're going to generate so much blood sugar, it's going to start creating a fatty liver and also create something called glycation. What does that mean? When you combine a protein with a starch or sugar in the presence of heat, as in bread, that combines with the protein in your red blood cells called hemoglobin. What happens is the sugar is going to connect to it and it's going to glycate. What does that mean? It's going to damage the protein so the protein doesn't work anymore. That's called glycation. So when someone checks your blood sugar, sometimes they do a test called A1C. What is that? That measures the average blood sugar over 3 months. And what they're really looking at is how much of that red blood cell is damaged or glycated, how much of that sugar has taken over that protein and made it a problem. So obviously they have it all rated, so you can actually look at that number and see how bad your blood sugar is. So a lot of people ask me, what supplements do I recommend? Now, of course, I'm not biased of my own high quality supplement line, but if you go to Amazon and type Dr. kenD Berry, you'll find more information. So what happens? You chew the bread, it starts to break down the sugar. The sugar is then going to go into the bloodstream and raise the blood sugar. Then what's going to happen? Insulin is going to come in there and remove that sugar very, very fast. The question is, where does it go? Well, it's going to be put as storage. It's going to go in your liver. It's going to go in your gut as belly fat. Then what happens over a period of time when you keep spiking that insulin is the cells start losing the control of that insulin. They become resistant to that insulin. That's called insulin resistance. And what that means is insulin is going to be less effective. So now the pancreas has to produce more more of it to create that same effect of lowering the blood sugar. So when the doctor looks at your blood sugar being normal, what they don't really test is the insulin spike. That's like a massive spike for literally 10 to 15 years, well before you even have a problem with your blood sugar, okay? So pre-diabetes, diabetes happens 10 to 15 to 20 years after this problem has been brewing in the oven. And so if they were to check the insulin level, they would probably find it pretty high. If you ever get your fasting insulin tested, you want it between 2 and 6, okay? If it's even 8 or especially 12, you already have a problem and you need to start cutting down not just the sugar in the diet, but the starch as well, which now you know it's hidden sugar. And the other thing about glycation, this is not just happening in the blood vessels, okay, in your red blood cells. It's happening in your skin. It's happening in the eyes. It's damaging and aging different parts of your body. It's damaging your kidneys, the lens of the eye, the retina. It's making your skin look older. It's making your joints more fragile. It's affecting the brain. And this is why for the majority of the whole wheat bread healthy population, this is not the problem. Okay, this is the problem for certain people, but not for the majority. It's the starch, which is actually hidden sugar. And then you have people that say, well, I eat whole wheat bread because it has fiber, and fiber is going to buffer the blood sugar. Well, let me just explain something. The difference between a blood sugar spike of whole wheat versus refined wheat is so minimal. This whole idea of whole wheat is healthier is a myth. It's still 65% starch. In fact, if you don't believe me, go ahead and test your blood sugars before and after. First sample the whole wheat, and then the next day sample refined wheat and look at the differences. It'll be almost the same. If you look at the glycemic index, bread from whole wheat versus bread from refined wheat, it's basically between 75 and 72. Nothing of any magnitude to actually give you more protection. Yet some people promote whole wheat as being something that's healthy. Now, I do want gluten allergies to pause to talk about those people that do have a severe allergy to gluten, or even the propensity to get celiac, which is 1% of the population. Those people that are susceptible to celiac disease, which is an autoimmune disease, it can be devastating if they consume gluten itself. So for those people, they need to avoid anything with gluten, but not replace it with gluten-free. That's not a good solution. And then you have other people that don't tolerate gluten. So for those people, they need to avoid gluten, because I'm not saying that gluten is healthy. Just if we compare the damage from this, from an average person versus the damage between the starch, this is much higher. And I want Modern Wheat Dangers to mention this modern wheat. The modern wheat is a hybrid. It's been engineered for more gluten. So you get that stretchiness that's in bread, but it comes with a package because the actual genetics or the chromosomes for the modern day wheat are completely different than the ancient wheat. And that's a fascinating topic that I've done other videos on, and I will put a link down below for you to learn more about that. But about 1% of the population has celiac, and another 6 to 7% has non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And for those people, they need to avoid all grains, period. Okay? Even the gluten-free products. This video is for the 90% of people that don't have a problem with gluten. So what if you're addicted to bread? What if you can't give up bread? There are a lot of other recipes that use other ingredients that are not grains. I will put some links down below of some recipes that my wife and I came up with, which actually are quite delicious. In fact, if you cannot give up bread yet, you need a recipe that tastes almost identical to the bread that you love. You should watch this video right here, because this is safe. You can consume it without having to worry about your blood sugar. Check it out. I put it up right here.